One in Three is intended for mature audiences. Episodes contain explicit content and may be triggering as they often include violence and other varying forms of abuse such as emotional, psychological, sexual, and physical. In most cases, names have been changed to protect all involved. Please note, statements and opinions of guests do not necessarily reflect those of my own. Hi, Warriors. Welcome to One in Three. I'm your host, Ingrid. I am really excited for this episode because I love stories of determination, perseverance, and strength. And I love stories of individuals who use those qualities to help others. I had the pleasure of conversing with Danielle Patrice, who is, well, I'm going to let her tell you. Here is part one. Hi, Danielle. Thank you for coming on and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here. I could not wait for this particular podcast interview. So thank you for having me.
I'm very excited to have you. And again, thank you for coming on. So we have a couple things that we're going to talk about. You have your own personal domestic violence story that you can share a little bit about, but then you also wrote a book because of all this. So there's so much information to get through. I'm going to mute myself and just let you take it away.
All right. So, yes, I am a mother. I am a domestic violence survivor. I'm an activist, and I'm now an author, a self-published author of the book, Neuroscience, the Ecosystem of Domestic Violence. It's a research book that is about helping people understand how domestic violence as a whole affects us, not just, just the couple in the picture, the abuser and the victim, but it also helps understand what's going on from the brain to societal levels, which includes, Congress, which includes politics, which includes going into school systems, which includes children, intergenerational violence, introducing not only the abuser and victim, but also introducing the victim defendants. It talks about, how our brains are affected through domestic violence as well. So it's a plethora of information that talks about domestic violence in its entirety.
You collaborated with a few individuals to write this book because of your experience.
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
So yeah, it was a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds, which I thought was amazing because I wanted people from, the different socioeconomical background. I wanted people from, different age ranges. I wanted different, ethnicities, everybody that plays a role, different professional backgrounds, which was the most important part, because, everybody has their own stance and from their own perspective. And I think one of the things that people don't understand, or I want to say ignore, is the experience. We all have life lessons. We all have experiences. And I think that that's one of the things that I cherish about the interviewees, because they all have different types of experience, no matter how young, no matter how old they are. And they're very wise in their own way. And so for me, I was able to obtain a psychologist, a sociologist. I was obtaining a victim defendant. I want to say not a coordinator, but she's a director over the victim defendant organization in Philadelphia. I have one as a victim director of an organization. And I'm not saying it correctly, but, we had a CPS worker to children, to social workers, and just a lot of people who put their input, and to really get a whole understanding. And that also includes the warden of a correctional facility and a former police officer as well. So it's a lot of information that I think that people would need to hear, and also be amazed at understanding, like, wow, this is what's happening throughout our entire system.
Agreed. And surely you had to get all that collaboration because neuroscience is a huge thing. Domestic violence, ecosystem, each of those portions of your title alone are just huge concepts. And domestic violence itself is completely multifaceted. There are so many things that influence the abuser, the victims, and everything that happens in between. And so, yeah, of course you had to collaborate with that many individuals.
Absolutely. And, that's the thing too, even because I want to say, I'm not a neuroscientist. I am a domestic violence survivor who happened to do research and wanting to understand what happened to me while being in this abusive marriage that was for over 9 years. So I had to figure out what is going on. And so for me, getting the neuroscience information, that was through research. That was through this amazing organization called Polygent, who enrolled me in their program, and along with their wonderful mentor, Isabella, who I'm very grateful for her and her experience, who is a neuroscience grad student, who helped guided me to understand the scientific methods and the process of that. And so for me, it was starting the research of different, neuroscience, scientific literature reviews, and going forth and understand the connection, the correlation between the brain and neuroscience, and not even understanding that, or not even knowing that this information existed until this research took place. So that was the big, like the epiphany moment for me, I'll say, having that. And then in addition with the interviews, and then I talk about my experience to tie it all together, it was just, I felt like this book was mind blowing. And I'm very proud of my work, that being able to have this and now being able to share it with all of you. It's amazing.
And we appreciate that for sure. And I want to maybe kind of circle back to not discuss everything you figured out, because we definitely want people to buy this book too.
Yes.
But one of my favorite things to hear in these stories, and it doesn't always happen, is when someone who is a victim or was a victim of domestic violence, how they are able to turn themselves around and do something like this, write a book and take their own experiences and learn an entire new concept of things in order to do this. And I think that your story is incredible, because you did come from abuse and into this success. And it's those stories that I feel give hope to those who are maybe listening and are still in those situations and think, well, how can I leave? How can I succeed after I leave? So I'm not sure. Would you like to share some of your story to kind of show us where you came from, and then let's get to the climax of what you've discovered in this book?
Yeah, sure. So I'll start where I met my former abuser, and that was in college. I went to Tennessee State University, and I met my ex-husband in 2008 in a Spanish class. And I kind of, I want to say when I met him originally, or seeing like, of someone, or you see them around. And I want to say that was kind of the circumstance in the beginning, because we were in the same class, but we weren't friends. And the thing was that I was very close with my teacher, who I still am in touch with to this day. And she was happy to see me over the summer. She was like, I saw Danielle over the summer at my job that I used to work at this restaurant. And I remember him blurting out, he was like, it's expensive food. And I used to laugh at that, because I used to say the same thing. Well, as time progressed, there was this particular assignment where we had to do this particular Spanish rap, because we were learning Spanish, and do this rap. And he noticed right away, he's like, I'm not from the South. And so for me, I'm from the East Coast. You go to school from a completely different environment, people pick up your accent right away. Oh, you're not from here. You're not from here. So for him, he picked that up right away. And after that, we became very good friends. He would walk me to class. I would say he was really a good friend for me. I say at the time, because I felt like he was there as a friend. We would, talk all the time, and, we would go to different classes together. Whatnot. He would help me with my car. So it was just like, I just thought he was a great guy at the time, and the interesting thing was, and I think about some of the things from back then. I remember a couple of women who weren't particularly keen on him, but I didn't see it, because I'm like, I thought he was a great guy. He was just a really cool guy. And so over time, I'll say, after I graduated, 6 weeks after I graduated from college, my mother committed suicide. And I feel that's a very important part to talk about, because that really took everything into a whole different turn. After I graduated from college, I was planning to go to grad school, maybe go to the West Coast and start my life. And so that didn't happen, because my bachelor's degree is in communications. So that, and my thing was, I was ready to do that. And then when my mother passed, everything went haywire. And he was there again as a friend. He was there. He met my family members, and some of them, they pretty much got along with him. But I will say, my father at the time, he picked up that he liked me, and that I had no idea. He had his own relationship, and I was doing my own thing. So for me, it was like I never dawned on that, like that he actually liked me until later on when I ended up deciding I wanted to go back to the East Coast because I lived in the South at the time. And I said this, going back to the East Coast, I said, I really wanted to get out of here because I wanted to really get my life together and not be in the South because my mother passed away in the South at the time. And he actually was saying, Dan, I'm actually flying or I'm driving back to my home. Why don't you come with me? And then, you can rent a car and drive, back home or whatever. And so I did that. And that's when a lot of things changed because, and the reason why I changed, and I'm leaving some part out, I'm going to tell you why in a minute, but my thing was, okay, I'm a good guy. Let's go ahead. We're going to have fun. And the thing was, I ended up getting in touch with his cousin, who she ended up calling me and saying, hey, he likes you. And I had no idea. Like, what do you mean he likes me? He's like, don't you have a girlfriend? He's like, no, he likes you. He likes you. And while on that road trip, I ended up confronting him. And I said, hey, your cousin said you liked me and whatnot. And so even though I knew he had his girlfriend, the story changed. He's like, I do like you and whatnot, but he's like, no, I'm not really with her. We haven't really been together since February. It was, and it's like, okay. It's like, and the thing was, what made me consider it was like, okay, well, why would he lie? Because I'm not thinking like at this point, I knew him for a year and a half. Why would he lie? So that kind of started off on that relationship. Now I'm leaving out parts of what made me turn to him because because at the end of the day, this is a lot of things happened in my family that kind of changed the dynamic also and the turn of events. They kind of, I want to say, leaned on him more as a friend. And I mean that because, so after my mother's passing, the burial, there was some money that I had gotten money from her former employer. And that's because what there was happening was there was a non-exclusivity clause. And with that clause, there's it's something where it's like if certain jobs, if you happen to pass away a certain way, you can or cannot receive any money from that job. And that's how I reclaimed some money because, there was a non-exclusivity. Suicide was not, considered, hey, you can't receive money from that. So that's the best way I'm trying to explain it off the top of my head. But anyway, and their family members were basically saying, hey, you have to pay me back for this. You have to pay me back for that. And it went from that paying back for the funeral to, okay, well, you have to pay me back for what you owed me from when I paid for you when you were a child. It's like, wait a minute, hold up. Like you should talk to my mother about that. At the end of the day, I had no control over what you bought when I was a kid. So it became a lot of issues with my family. And then also in the same token, I was still grieving my mother in the 2 months time period. And my father had called me and he said, you need to move on. You need to get over it. And I was so appalled. I was so offended. I was angry because I was raised by my mother. I was raised by a single parent. My father did not raise me. So it was, how dare you say this about my mother? You never raised me. She was the one that was my main caregiver. So I was just so disgusted at that point that it turned, me and my now ex-husband got really close. We got really close because I felt like, I was alone in this. I was my mother's only child. I did not have my family that I could feel like I could be supported in this situation. And now I have a situation where I'm with this guy who I think is a great guy. I think he's a great friend. And now things are turning into this romantic type of situation because it did end up becoming this whole whirlwind of a situation while during this road trip and while, going to visit his family and whatnot. But I'll say that it turned into a different scenario because one thing I will say is that knowing someone who's an abuser as a friend is completely different than knowing someone that's an abuser being in a relationship. I had no idea that he was the kind of person that he was in that relationship because as a friend, I thought he was wonderful. He was a really great guy, but he put on that charisma. He was able to, I don't say to woo me, but he was able to be that person, that shoulder to lean on, that shoulder to cry on. He was able to be that person. And, for me, that's what I needed at that time. So I feel like now, looking back on those years, and what I felt even then was that he was the first person, even though I leaned on him and not only being in his home state, that was also the first time I felt unsafe. He was the first person I felt where, we got into an argument. I didn't have a way to get home. I didn't have a way to, who's going to help me. And that was a feeling I could not shake, being in his home state. Like, I felt safer in my area than where I was, compared to where he was living, or not living, but where he would visit. Because it was just a lot of things that was taken, that was happening. And I'm being very vague because some of this is a little traumatic, I'm gonna be honest, and some of it, it's reliving it to tell the story. So, bear with me. But the hardest thing for this was the not knowing how to get out of this. Even in the relationships, I was not strong enough to get out of this type of relationship. I was not strong enough to really get out of this, because I felt like before my mother passed, I was a completely different person. I was very independent. I was ready to take on the world. And then after her passing, it was like my whole life is gone, because my mother was part of my life, a big chunk of my life. So, and everything that I was her. And so it's just that for me, that still takes a toll, and for then to have this situation, now I'm becoming a whole another identity. Who is this person? I'm with this man, and he's not very nice as I thought he was. He's not this person that I thought he was. And that also forwards to later on, I ended up getting pregnant with my oldest son. And he ended up having his own mental breakdowns, his own issues and whatnot. And from that moment, I will say, and this was 2009, I ended up having to be in this situation where, okay, I had to figure out how to get a job, how to get my car, how to get my apartment, how to get everything all squared away. And I was able to manage that by myself within the 7 months. And I had everything ready. And the thing was that there was an apartment I was rented to, well, it was rented to me through I'll say I have like consider a family friend, or like a close person of our family who was a pastor in this community. And we pretty much knew her for a long time. We share mutual relatives, so this woman is a big part of my life as well, because she also eulogized my grandparents, my great aunt, and my mother's funeral. So it was, this was someone I thought I could go to. And the thing is that with this situation, he was dealing with his own situation. He was doing his own things. And then he ended up coming to live with me and our oldest son. Because at that time I was pregnant. So we had our son. And then I'll say that, when we got together and he moved into the apartment with me, I had my child. A few moments later, we did talk about getting married, because that was also one of the things that when we first started dating, he was saying in a few first weeks, yeah, you're going to be my wife. And at 22, I'm in my early 20s. I'm like, oh, wow, we're going to get married. I'm going to get married, that kind of thing. So it was just excited. So now here we are. I think I'm 23 at this point. And within a few months after having my child, the pastor called and said, hey, look, we waited until you had your child to, and give you some time to, recuperate. But you guys have to either get married or he can't stay there. And so at this point, I'm like, okay, this is my family now. I got to figure this out. So we did end up getting married, got married in November of 2010. And the one thing I will say is that I experienced emotional and verbal abuse. It wasn't until the night before when I started dealing with physical. And the first thing happened, because it was an argument that night before. And he pinned me down and he said, I could do whatever I want to because you'll be my wife now. I didn't know how to get out of that situation. I didn't know how I was going to make it to the next day. And the thing was like, okay, I'm going to have to go through it. I didn't have at this point, I was definitely estranged from my family. I was not in touch with hardly anybody really. And so now here's this coming in this situation, and he's turning into a whole completely different person. Not to mention, and I have to go backwards, not to mention, he had asked my family prior to us getting married for the blessing. And this was a year before this happened. He asked for their blessing. And one of my relatives said to them, well, you can't have my blessing because she has to handle business. And what she meant by that was paying money. That's what this was. And so what ended up happening was that she kept dogging my character, just destroying my character. Oh, she's immature. Oh, she's this type of person, and this and that. And I heard half of it. And I was so angry with her because it was like, you're going to bash your sister's daughter. That to me, I felt, to someone you don't really know. And the thing is, looking also at that situation is that you let this man know in so many ways that we don't protect her. And that's the thing that, to this day, looking back on that, you're letting them know that we don't support, we're not helping, we're not involved in this. Even though they did help, later on in the years, but even still, you initially gave this person the go ahead to, hey, we don't protect her. Because anybody, I'm tell you, if you have family members out there that you're, that's in a situation like that, you never let the abuser know that you don't support that, because he ran with it. My ex-husband ran with that. And then it also became more of an issue later on. So I did go through the wedding, going back. I did go through the wedding. I did get married. And, trying to put on a brave face after a night like that, it was startling. It was just like trying to suppress everything and trying to put on this happy face. And I was not happy. I did not like my wedding. I was, to me, I felt it was a mediocre wedding. And I felt that the wedding was not, it was not something that a little girl that dreams of, that this is what I wanted. Not to mention my mother was passed on, and she was the one that wanted to walk me down the aisle. So here I am in this emotional state and trying to smile and trying not to cry and trying to have all of these things, together. And, for me, over the time, it was just going through the motions, not only, going through with my ex-husband, but also still grieving my mother's passing. And with the first, and I'll say that after the marriage, the first incident was 3 weeks after we got married. And that was when, I don't even remember the argument, but we got into it. And I remember walking out the room to go into the kitchen, and he runs out of there and he pushes he pushes it against me against the wall, and he rips my left shirt, and that shirt was my mother's shirt. And it was just constant arguing after argument after argument after argument. And I remember the first time, then in the midst of that, he was also getting acquainted with this pastor, and he was getting acquainted with different members of that community, of that, organization. And some of those people kind of had a little bad blood with my family, because it wasn't always the greatest situation. However, that's when he would vent to them, that was another moment where they would say, oh, well, Danielle and her family, they're crazy. They're crazy. And, that kind of thing. So it was just like they gave him more ammunition to work with. And that's when, I'd say, in my opinion, that's when down the line, he was the first one that filed the restraining order against me. He took my son for 4 days and had this restraining order, because they were also the ones that influenced him to do that. And come to find out, I had to go through this court as a victim. I had not understanding what is going on, because in my opinion, I'm feeling like I'm being the one that's abused. I've had my head, he's headbutting me where I'm having a big old knot and I'm embarrassed to go outside. The arguments are constant. It was just constant chaos for me. And this was in the beginning of the marriage. And for me, I felt that, I going through the courts, going through the judge, I'm in this whirlwind. Like, I don't know what's going on. I couldn't eat, couldn't really deal with anything. And one of my aunts, who I ended up eventually getting in touch with, was there. And she's like, Danielle, while I was going through this court, she's like, you didn't stand up for yourself when I went into the courtroom. Basically, I ended up, being in this courtroom, and this judge is like, well, you can do visitation, you can do this and this and that. And I'm just like, what's going on? And that is why mine said that, hey, you didn't say anything. You didn't stick up for yourself, because I didn't know what I was expecting. I didn't know what to do. And this woman who, I think after that court hearing, I want to see a judge. I want to see this person right now. I want an emergent hearing. And there was a domestic violence division in one of the courts. And this woman, and to this day, and I've seen her recently, and to this day, I said, you are my hero. Her name is Sue. And she was over the domestic violence division. And she said, to basically put everything on an equal footing, you have to file a restraining order because you're a domestic violence victim. And she explained to me pretty much what was going on. And one of the things I said, I'm my son's main caregiver. I don't know why he took my son for 4 days. To this day, I still don't know. And she ended up calling his mother, and she said, you know what? She said, you have until 7:30 to bring that child back home, or you're going to be in contempt of court and you're going to be arrested. And she came back with my son, and it was just like, wow, and even then with the case, and we still had this restraining order thing going on, both of us. And the judge found him more reliable than me because at the time I wasn't available. I'm not saying available. I wasn't as a good storyteller the way he was. I wasn't as good as a, speaker as he was. Very charismatic, knew what he was talking about, knew how he to say it. For me, I'm just like, I don't know what's going on. I'm trying to figure this out. This is what's happening. This is how he's acting. But I'm flustered and upset. So it's not taken into consideration either, because they're looking at him as, okay, well, he's well put together and he knows what he's talking about, so he must be the victim. That was not true, so even then we still got back together throughout that time. And this was over a period of years. It was like almost every other year filing restraining orders. There's some sort of, chaotic situation, some sort of abusive situation. One of the two ones I will talk about that I feel are very important for people to understand is the 2016 incident. And that was when my ex-husband had we got into some argument that earlier that day. It was just him just trying to destroy my character and just talking about me. The way that he talked, it was degrading. It was disgusting. It was, you're talking to someone like you're trash type of way. And that evening, I didn't want to talk to him anymore. I just like, what, I'm sick of this. Because over the years of, going back and forth, I would go back and forth between either him and my family and that was hard having to deal with that as well. Going back to, which is the lesser of the two evils, which is the easier of the two situations at that point, because I couldn't deal with him or having the restraining orders or, dealing with all of these other things, whether I would file or he would file, or, I'm calling CPS or he's calling CPS. So that it was always a tit for tat type of situation, because I literally just wanted him to get some help. I wanted, my family. I wanted this family to work. I wanted my children to work, because I have 2 children. But it was more of for him, I feel like it was more retaliatory. And that's where I had the issue, the constant back and forth. So it was for me having to have evidence and whatnot. But anyway, in 2016, so that particular evening, I was watching Why'd I Get Married, or trying to watch that or something, and trying to talk to me. And it's just, I'm not trying to hear it. I don't want to be bothered. And we get into this argument, and I end up grabbing the bottle, and I tried to hit the wall with it, and it didn't break, because it was just like, get away from me. And the thing is that, I say that because this is a situation where people don't understand yet. You have laws, you have all these things, but here's the thing about it. You don't know what you're going to be up against in that situation. We all wear the mask, and we all, society, we all polite. But when it comes to your life, what are you going to do? That's the thing. What are you going to do in that scenario if someone is, is abusive and is keen to wanting to put their hands on you? What are you going to do to fight back? And in that moment, that's what I did. So it's not the fact that, it is what it is, bottom line. So at that moment, it's fighting back and forth. And he ends up going to the kitchen to get a butcher knife. And he gets this knife. And I'm trying to get out of it because I see it. He yanks me back from the back of my collar, yanks me back, and I fell, and he locks the door, and he has the knife to my neck. And he's like, and I remember scratching me where on my chest, and it looks like Wolverine scratched me. And I'm seeing his blood and whatnot. And I remember at one point he had it to my neck, and then he got me up, and then he has the knife to my face. He's like, do you want a divorce? And there was a third person, and I said, put the knife down. He puts the knife down. I pushed him off as far as I could because I want him off me. Fighting again. He gets the knife, not the knife. He gets the iron that you use to iron the clothes. At that point, this was January of 2016, and if anybody knows how that time, it was very cold. It was, it was freezing outside. So I didn't have my coat. I didn't have I didn't have my boots on. No socks. I ran out there with a shirt, pants, and that was it. Hair is all over the place. Nothing, and long story short, he chases me down the stairs with this iron, like he's going to bash my head. And I ended up running outside, and someone said, run zigzag. And I ran in zigzag on this hill. He fell, and I ran to a high school friend of mine who lived in the same complex as I did. And I banged on her door, and, she sees me now because she's like, oh my God, like she knew, we knew each other since high school. So at this point, we knew each other for a good long time. And she's seeing me like in this disarray and scared. And I remember that they called the police at the point. the cops ended up taking me down to the station. And because he had someone else there, they told him, oh, there was no knife. There was no. So now it's their word against me because he has a witness. So he was able to file the restraining order against me first. And the thing is that when you are filing, especially in New Jersey, if you file for, it's a first come, first serve. So whoever gets it first, that against the other person, and you have to get out the house. You don't have access to the children. You have to, you basically whatever you can get, you have to get a police escort one time, maybe twice, to go get your clothes and whatnot, until you actually have a hearing for the domestic violence. At that point, we both had our attorneys. And I had to, we had pretty much a 1 week on, 1 week off situation with the kids. And, and for that, I was thankful that what my aunt was saying that, no, you want it 1 week on, 1 week off, so they can see who's actually the responsible parent here. And so when it came to my children, they were in school on time, their clothes were looking good, like everything was normal. When it came to him picking it up and taking them to school, it was like 12 o'clock in the afternoon, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, their clothes. It was just crazy to the point where the schools ended up calling CPS to get involved because it was just, constant. But seeing the thing is, like in the state of New Jersey, if you don't have, if they're not 6 and they're not in kindergarten, you don't have to, it's optional. So I had to fight that as well, and so it's like he knew what he was doing. And that kind of, I'll say that incident really kind of got me to, all right, I'm 1 foot in, 1 foot out, because we did reconcile. And I said, look, this is the last time. I said, if we do this again, you got to get some therapy. I'm not doing this, and that's, if this doesn't work, we're going to be having to get divorced. And then after that, I'll say the reconciliation, it still wasn't easy because I couldn't trust him. I would call him the devil, and I didn't know when the devil would show up. I felt safest when my children were around than him and, me and him together. So, and that again, and it happened all over again, in that same cycle. And that led to the incident of the last incident, which was May 20th, 2018. And what took place was he basically had my oldest son till 4 o'clock in the morning. And when he had him out till 4 o'clock in the morning, my younger son is asleep, like I'm asleep. He's not answering his phone. The phone's off, and it's like, why do you have my child till 4 o'clock in the morning? He needs to be asleep. I don't care what you do, but bring my son home. And what ends up taking place is he ends up coming back. Of course, we get into an argument after that. And my son, he's going to the room and sleep. And I confronted myself because he's basically, you're with your mistress at this point, because there's no reason to be out here at 4 o'clock in the morning. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. You're not working. What are you doing? And especially with our oldest son. And that led to him trying to pin me down, trying to fight and all those other things. And my youngest son, who was 4 at the time, he gets up and I just saying, like, stay back. And, I didn't want him in the room. So my son ended up getting he just watched me getting pinned down because I didn't want him near me. But even in the middle of the argument, because there was another person in the room at that point, and my son is raising his hands up. So, and while in the middle of the argument, I felt like he, in his own way, trying to de-escalate, because one of us would pick him up and we wouldn't be as argumentative as when he was picked up versus when it was just me and him. And then, at the same time, he's calling me all types of names. He's saying all these insults. And then it gets to a point where I'm sitting down, my son is sitting down, this other person sitting down, and he said, I can kill you with my bare hands. And he's doing this hand motion towards me. And my son is staring at him. He said, I can't do it because he's watching. That was the moment I said, I'm done. I don't care if I have to crawl out this marriage. I'm done. And meanwhile, I stole my phone. To this day, I don't know where that phone went. It's over the years of me having to run to friends, to family, asking for, trying to get out of the situation, going back and forth to court, all these things, not feeling protected, asking someone to protect me. And it took my 4-year-old son. And at that point, if I can't do it for myself to get out, I'm damn sure going to get out for my children. And that's where everything was just like, I'm done. I'm done. I'm going to fight this. And so the next day I had my seventh restraining order, final restraining order, because in New Jersey, which is actually one of the strongest in the country, that is, so you go from a temporary to a final, and final is forever. Some states are like maybe 1 year, 2 years, whatnot. New Jersey is forever. And then if you go to another state, then they have to oblige to the Jersey's actual restraining order. So New Jersey is very powerful when it comes to the restraining order out here. But for me, I did file my last one. CPS got involved as well. And the thing is that, I also had to deal with the fact that, one, he stopped paying rent. He stopped paying all these things 3 months prior so that he could leave us destitute. And not to mention, I was also in the middle of filing for my divorce because I didn't have any money at that point. So I had to learn the terminology and file for my own divorce, won my divorce, everything I asked for pretty much. And I still, was able to get, I don't want to say still was able to, get the things I needed for my family. However, because he stopped paying all these bills and everything, we ended up becoming homeless. And so we ended up living at the bottom of a basement of a barbershop. Because even when I was trying to work and get myself and hustle and, get this money, it wasn't enough. And time ran out. And this was all before my sons were starting school. And the thing was, it was that, even though I didn't have the people that I wanted to support me, there were amazing people who did come into play. And I thank Nisha, who was part of the Grow Foundation, Excel with Carol, and a lot of different people who helped. A lot of different friends from my son's schools, their parents were amazing during that time. And the thing was that, I wanted to make sure that even though we were going through this, I didn't want us to look like we were going through it. So even at night, I would get our clothes, or throughout the day while they were in school, I was getting our stuff out of there, getting evicted, and getting, washing the clothes by hand and, having the fan on. But by day, they're going to school like it's normal. They're going to school like everything is like, and that's how I wanted to, because this was traumatic for all of us, and the thing is that even though it's been years since I've been out of it, it's still not over. It's still fighting, what has happened. It's still, there's things that are still, I want to say that's still not happening, but it's the fact that the ramifications. My oldest has the memories. My younger one may not, but, the thing is, how do we deal with that? They're also growing up too, and not only was this my ex-husband, this was their father. So now it's creating a space, not only for me to heal, but creating a space for them to heal and to acknowledge their own pain and saying to them that, you have every right to love him. You have every right to care for him. You have every right to pray for him. You can be angry with him, whatever you feel, that is your right. And to have them feel safe, to have those feelings and to talk to me and say, hey, look, this is how I feel. And this is what I want you to, to talk about or whatnot. So this is why, I'm doing what I do, because I know what my children went through. I know what I went through. I work alone. I don't do this with others because at the end of the day, nobody can tell your story like you. Nobody can talk about your story and know the ins and outs of it like you can. So for me, that's what led me to wanting to understand this book or started this book, because what I did, I started advocating. I started really seeing like, as a survivor, when I was a victim, I was going through the lens, just going through the tunnel, the tunnel vision, and I couldn't see everything out. And then having to say everything I went through, and it's like, oh my God, I really went through this. And then advocating and start talking about it, where I've met with different, politicians, where I've met with different organizations and talked about it, but talked at different events. One of the things that I was met with, is I'm so sorry, I'm praying for you and whatnot. And that's all well and good, but that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for change.
What a story, right? The great part is Danielle isn't done. I will be back next week with part 2. Until then, stay strong. And wherever you are in your journey, always remember, you are not alone. Find more information, register as a guest, or leave a review by going to the website 1in3podcast.com. That's the number 1, IN, the number 3, podcast.com. Follow 1in3 on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at 1in3podcast. To help me out, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. 1in3 is a .5 Pinoy production. Music written and performed by Tim Crow.